Hey everybody, how are you? So this is just a little intro to a QA I did last Saturday at the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. Michael Anthony was there on Friday. I wasn't there, but I was there on Saturday when Warren DeMartini was the guest artist, and they set up this little Q&A with me to talk about the book and to talk about Edward. And I thought it was pretty cool, pretty fun. So I wanted to share the link with you. Again, this was from the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp up in North Hollywood on Saturday, this past Saturday. And yeah, I think you'll dig it, kind of fun. Some of the people out in the audience had some good questions, and I wanted to share. So you guys be good, okay? See ya.
And she had booked me into the Madame Wong's East and Madame Wong's West Club without ever hearing the band. So I loved her, I was indebted to her. She said, listen, there's somebody upstairs you have to meet. If Michelle had somebody I wanted to meet this person because she was the Yenta of Hollywood. I mean, she knew everything that was going on. So we walk up the stairs at the whiskey to the dressing rooms, which is like the inside of a garbage can, you know, and floors are strewn with cigarette butts and empty beer glasses. And over in the corner, there's this guy standing over there, you know, with this amazing head of hair, smoking a cigarette. And I'm pretty certain that I recognized who it was. This is 77. And I also want to tell you, I had never seen Van Halen live at that point. Everybody in Hollywood had heard about Van Halen, but I had never seen him perform. But I'm pretty sure I recognized who that person was, flyers or somewhere like that. So she walks me over, and she says, Eddie Van Halen, Steve Rosen, Eddie Van Halen, Godhead. You know, when Michelle called somebody Godhead, that was her way of saying, this person was more than a human being. This was like, you know, the top of the mountain here. So we just started talking, and you know, we found a bunch of common interests. Eric Clapton came up. I was a monster Clapton fan, going back to the Yardbirds and you know, John Mayall and the Boosters. I mean, I knew a lot about Eric Clapton, and Edward loved him. Was Edward's biggest influence, I would later find out. Thank you, man. We started talking about Jeff Beck. He had brought up guitar player named Michael Monarch, formerly with Steppenwolf. And it was just one of those conversations that was seamless. You know, man, no awkward silences, none of that kind of stuff. And I just really liked the guy. You know, I knew that Van Halen had scored a monster deal on Warner Brothers. So I said, man, you guys got this big deal on Warner's. That must feel amazing. And he goes, yeah, man, I think we made a good record. You know, I hope it does okay. I mean, I'll tell you, man, if any one of you guys had scored a deal on Warner Brothers Records, if I had scored a deal with my band, man, I would go, fuck, man, can you believe it? We're on Warner's and we're going to sell 1 million records. Edward was not like that, man. His ego was really an internal thing. And it was just an amazing conversation. So 45 minutes later, an hour later, he runs out of the room, and I'm kind of standing there, and he comes back and he's got a pen. And he picks up some slip of paper off the floor, and he's signing something, and he gives it to me, and it's a phone number. He goes, yeah, man, call me. I'd like to see you again. I thought, wow, unbelievable. So that was the first time meeting Edward Van Halen. 8 months later, I get the February shipment of records from Warner's. Warner's sends out monthly shipments of records, as did every label. And I was on all these labels, and so I was getting all these records. One of the perks of being a poverty-stricken rock and roll journalist, right? So I remember opening the Warner's record shipment, and there was a Little Feat record. There was a Ruddles record, the Beatles parody, and there was this Van Halen record. I go, oh, that's that band Van Halen. And there's that guy, that's that guy that what's that? Is he playing some kind of a Strat or something? That's not a Strat. You know, what is that? You know? And I put the record on, and don't anybody here shoot me for this one. I put it on, and I was underwhelmed. man, you know, and it took me a lot to write that in the book. I should lie about this and say it's the most amazing debut record I'd ever heard, but it just did not hit me that way. And if I may rewind just a minute, you have to understand that I'm used to, I grew up listening to, you know, Jeff Beck's Truth and Beckola and the first Zepp record and the first Hendrix record and Free and, you know, Procol Harum, and those are the kinds of guitar players and the kinds of records I was used to hearing, you know. So I had the bar set very, very high. So I heard the record and I thought, yeah, you know, it sounds kind of like Deep Purple, you know, kind of fast shuffles, and you know, it's kind of doing that Blackmore thing with vibrato. I didn't get it. I just didn't get it, you know. Everybody else around me got it. I thought, Rosen, you're missing something. Go back and listen to it. So the next day I sat down and I listened to it very closely. And I go, oh my God, that's what everybody was hearing. That's the tone, and that's the articulation, and that's the feel, and then that groove, that swing that he had, that not a lot of American guitarists had. Edward being, you know, originally a European guy, but it was that swing that he incorporated in all his playing. So I got it, and I realized how important a record that was. So, yeah, that was my first meeting with Edward Van Halen.
So what about, and you know, obviously people are going to have a lot of questions about Eddie. We'll open it up in a sec. But did you have a similar relationship with Alex too, or it was just kind of Eddie?
Good question. I've tried to remember really when I sort of first met Alex, and I looked back through my recorded archives. I have lists of interviews, and most of them are dated. And I did an interview with Alex back in '83. So I probably knew him. You know, it's hard to remember when I first met him. I was probably up at 5150. You know, Edward, where Edward lived in Coldwater was just about 8 minutes away from where I lived in Laurel Canyon, just up Mulholland, and I was over at his place, or he was over at mine. And Alex was probably over at Ed's one day, and we just met, and we kind of keep running into each other because I was over there a lot. But no, I didn't have anywhere near the relationship I had with Edward that I had with Alex. We were friendly. I mean, we got along really well. You know, they did like some they would do like these huge pre-production rehearsals, and invite a lot of people and rent out one of the huge rooms at SIR or Paramount or somewhere, you know, and there'd be a bunch of people there. And I remember seeing him there several times, you know, before they went on to play. And we got on really well. And there's a great chapter in the book where we actually went on a double date. You know, he asked me, man, you want to go out on a double date? I thought, are you fucking kidding me? Yeah, man, I want to go out with you on a double date. So he was then with this girl he was seeing, and I was with this monster of a bitch that I was seeing. Excuse me, ladies, but this woman was nasty. And at any given moment during the evening, I kept expecting her to walk off and go hang with Alex and his girlfriend. You have to read the book to get the whole story to them. But yeah, so we went out, you know, and it was friendly. We were really friendly. He knew that I was writing the book. In '85, just to backtrack a little again, in '85, I was going to write Edward's authorized biography. I said, Ed, man, listen, writers are going to come to you, and they're going to want to write your life story. I'd like to be the person to do that. And he goes, yeah, man, well, I can't think of anybody else to do that. So that felt amazing, of course. And so I started working on that book, you know, gathering interviews and stuff. And sorry, I forgot my train of thought. Yeah, so. Alex and I were friendly. Oh, that's it, sorry. So I was over there a lot, and he saw me hanging out with his younger brother, and Alex, trust me, was the older brother. Alex was ever watchful of Edward, you know, and understandably. But I think he realized in me I was a gentle soul. I loved and respected his brother. I was never going to do him any harm, and I think he recognized that and appreciated that. And in turn, kind of opened himself up, you know, sat down with me for a very lengthy interview in '85 for the book, which actually I just put up on my YouTube page if anybody's interested. And it was great. He was very friendly and open.
Can you imagine going on a double date with one of the Van Halen brothers? I mean, is that not the dream double date? That's incredible. So we heard a little bit about, you know, how you met Eddie and everything, but how did that relationship evolve over the years? You know, were you friendly with him up until the end?
Was I friendly with him up until the end? I could lie. You know, I was going to lie in the book and say, yeah, man, it was 26 years and it was amazing, but it was not. And I don't want to give away the ending to anybody here who may still be thinking about getting a copy.
And we'll have copies available after this, too.
So Edward, and again, I tried to answer the question in the book, and it's really difficult. Edward changed. Edward started changing. I recognized it probably as early as 91, 92, and I don't know what it was from. I think maybe there were some ongoing problems with the band. I think there might have been some turmoil with the label. I don't know this. Maybe there was some marital things going on, but he was changing. And from that period on till about 2003, it was just a changed relationship. I didn't spend nearly as much time with him. We used to have this ongoing joke back in the day. So I was doing a lot of interviews with Edward back in the day for Guitar World. I did these 3 pretty big cover stories. I was writing for Japanese and European magazines, and they were forever wanting stories. And I had this direct line to Edward. So I called him up and go, Ed, man, you need to do a story for an English magazine. He goes, yeah, man, come over, I'll come over, and we'll do something, you know. So I remember calling him up one day and said, hey, man, German magazine wants a story, can we get together? And he says, oh, you need to call my manager. And that was his goof on me. It's like, yeah, call my manager, you know. Like, of course, you can call me directly. And I started laughing, you know, and this is on the telephone, and he's not chuckling on the other end. And he says, no, really, man, you need to call my manager. I go, yeah? He goes, yeah, man. He goes, I really can't be your friend anymore. You know, I can deal with you, you know, if you're just going to interview me. And that was a pretty shocking phone call to receive. And it was just strange. And again, I tried to understand why or what was happening. Some people posited the notion that management had been whispering in his ear, hey, don't get too close to that lighter, you know, isolate yourself a little more. I honestly don't know. But in answer to your question, no, it wasn't this amazing friendship for the first 13 or 14 years as it was those last dozen years. It changed, and not for the better, unfortunately. So, but you know, I still hang on to those first years, you know, and those are remarkable. I wouldn't have traded those for anything.
And then we'll open it up to questions, because I already see some hands coming up. But you know, I'm just curious. Did after the change, as you put it, did you ever get a chance to reconnect with him at all before his death, or that was kind of the last communication?
That's a good question. I actually did a couple of interviews with him. Actually, probably 2 or 3. Then what was happening was Warner's was setting up the interviews. And typically, you know, if you want to do an interview with the band, you go through the label publicist, the management. I didn't have to do that, as I had mentioned. I would just call Edward. But at that point, it was all the label setting up interviews. And so I think it was 93. They had set up an interview. Hard to remember exactly the chronology. It's in the book if anybody's interested. And I wasn't going to go. I mean, I hadn't seen Edward for a while. You know, the interviews were taking place up at 5150, and I thought, you know, I can't bring myself to drive up there and just, you know, go through that. I thought, well, you know what, I do want to see the guy again. You know, maybe things have changed. Maybe, you know, he's going to be happy again. And I went into they held it in, I think out in the control room. And it was nasty. He was just a different guy. He almost treated me like he didn't know who I was. Or actually, he knew who I was, but he had forgotten what had transpired those previous years. And it was uncomfortable. And, you know, I was asking him questions, and he was giving me answers, and I had interviewed Edward Van Halen enough to know when he was reading from a script, and literally, I could have answered the questions myself. It was just so surface, and he never dug deep for anything. So I ran into them in '95. Gary Sharon, Warner Brothers did another interview up at 5150, and it was the same. It was just removed, and I think after that, up until 2003, maybe there was a phone conversation in there somewhere. Actually, there were. I worked on a documentary, called Van Halen: The Early Years, which I've actually watched again. It was on YouTube, which was actually an amazing documentary, and that became the nail in the coffin. He was upset about that. Alex was upset about that. And I don't want to give that story because that's a pretty amazing story. But it never returned to what it was. And there would be little hints, and he'd say something, or for a second it'd be like that old Van Halen I knew. And then I'd go, oh my God, that guy is still in there somewhere. And then it would be gone again. And that almost made it even harder. But it was sad.
I know that we had a question over here. Let's get that. I can walk it around if you want to. Sure. There we go. We finally got one of these. Thank you for coming, and I think this is a question you've probably asked for times, but okay, I'm going to the Brown Sound, and his first album, there's a guy that I connected with on YouTube who's like perfectly mastered the Brown Sound with all his engineering, very technical, great player too. And he asked me to ask you.
Sorry, what was his name?
I'll tell you, man. I can't actually remember his name off the top of my head. And he asked me to ask you, just in one of the interviews on the first album, Eddie sort of mentioned something about a small amp, like maybe it was a Fender or something, other than the things we know about, like the Variacs. Did he ever talk about that recording and how he got that sound? Specifically, did he use a small amp at any time? Like maybe it was a Fender Princeton or that kind of thing?
He had never mentioned anything like that to me. It was always the Marshalls, Don Landy. He had never brought that up to me. Certainly possible.
You mentioned it in passing, and I don't like this guy is like so into this. It's like his whole life, and I think he said he's sort of offhanded. And I don't know if it registered with you. I can ask him for what specific that interview was.
What was it? Something he said in one of my interviews?
In jest, yeah. He sort of just said it off to the side. I don't think you caught it. And then he was like, I wonder if you talked about it later, and can you find out what it is?
What has happened? So I'm sitting there with Edward Van Halen, and it's 78, interview him for the first time, and the first record has come out. And, we have this conversation, and, like you said, he would have said something in passing, and for me, it was just another thing him talking about, Did I have any idea that, 5 decades later that someone was going to, crawl over, cut glass to know about that? I mean, had I known, I would have spent more time on stuff like that, but at the time, he just said, oh, it's just part of the conversation, I mean, there's a bunch of those times when I go back and I go, oh my God, why didn't I ask him more about that, or this and that?
If we have any other questions, feel free to just raise hands. Got one back here. Oh, good. We got another mic. Awesome.
Yeah, besides asking him why he doesn't talk to you anymore, if you could ask him anything, what would it be? What would the answer be?
I'm sorry.
He said, besides asking him why you guys don't talk anymore, if you could ask him one more question, what would it be?
Wow. Edward, what happened? I don't know how you guys are, but something like that happens in life. My first reaction is, well, what did I do wrong? What did I say to him that could have hurt him like that? What did I what had I done to betray him or lie to him, you know? And honestly, I didn't do anything. There's nothing, so yeah, I suppose there have been two questions, you know, what happened to you and why did you treat me that way? You know, I'd love to have those answers.
We've got a question over here, and then we'll go to you.
Thanks for coming. Were you around him and close to him at the time that Wolfgang was born, and do you have any kind of relationship with Wolfgang?
Good question. I've never met Wolfgang. However, one of the last conversations I had with Edward, Wolf was 11. And just one of these conversations, I think maybe that the old Edward was there again. It was a telephone conversation, and he was talking about Wolfgang, and I knew that he had a son. He goes, listen to this, and he puts up some other kind of recorder he had, I guess up to his phone, and I'm listening to it, and there's somebody's doing this groove, and it sounds like John Bonham, you know. I go, wow, that's pretty amazing. He goes, yeah, that's Wolfgang, you know, I taught him to play drums in 3 minutes, you know. Anybody else saying that, you say, yeah, right, your son learned drums in 3 minutes. But that was Wolf. I mean, obviously he had Van Halen blood coursing through his veins. I've never met him, but I'm pretty positive that's the first time Edward ever talked about his son, outside of his family, of course, and to the band. Saying those things to me. I'd love to meet Wolf, you know. I'd love to tell him, you know, what it was like meeting his father in 77 and 78 and 79. Those first records, those first tours. No, never had a chance to meet him.
Hey, Steve. You talked about, were you close to the band management at all? Like after Ed Leffler came in, when Sammy joined, and then when he passed away, to me, the band really changed when new management came in, and that was at early 90s. I think Ed Leffler passed in 93. I'm not even going to mention the new management, I'm not a big fan. Because the band really, there's a lot of things going on. Were you close to the management or through those interviews? Did you see that change?
No, but I know exactly what you're talking about, and again, I don't know if we're positive sure, but I've heard things from people that yes, that's part of why it would change. You know, and you can't make yourself so accessible and go back. You know, we're gonna know about that guy. I didn't know the management. I never met that management. I met Ed Leffler a couple times. I think I probably met Noel Long a couple times. But no, I never really had any relationship with them. I mean, it's sad to think that was part of it, something so external. I think your observation probably holds some truth, for sure.
Hey, Steve, a little bit off the Van Halen topic, but in terms of being right here. Yeah. Did you ever interview a guitar player who you thought was going to be huge, who maybe got to a certain level but didn't take it to the crazy level that you thought was going to be massive? And if so, who?
Wow. One of my favorite bands of all time was Spirit. I thought Randy California was one of the greatest unsung guitar players who's ever lived. He was sort of a acolyte with Jimi Hendrix and played in a band together back in New York, way back in the day. His use of feedback and the way he would layer guitars, his songwriting, his singing, I thought he should have been monstrous. There's a band called Quicksilver Messenger Service. I thought John Cipollina, who more recently has gotten some of those accolades, I thought he was amazing playing that in an SG with that big speed tremolo that he's on there, that piece of shit, but he played it so gracefully. Look, I mean, some of these people have received success, but not what I think they deserve. I think Andy Timmons is one of the greatest guitar players I've ever heard. Look, Andy's huge and he sells records and tours. But I mean, I think he's a monster. I just don't think people are that cognizant of who he is. Yeah, I mean, I could probably think of some others, but those guys kind of stand out for me. Thank you.
Do we have more questions back here? And real quick, I'm curious. Okay, I'm going to go to you, but I'm also curious, just because you mentioned Randy, California, what do you think of that Zeppelin lawsuit with Spirit?
I'll tell you. I think what happened, I think that Jimmy remembered that descending phrase that Randy played in Taurus, and it just stuck in his head. And he interpreted it. Did he steal it outright? I don't know. I don't think so. But, you know, for him to go to those lengths to deny it, and, the California family was just looking for a little bit of parody. I think that was a pretty mean-spirited thing to do. Look, the guy has written one or two good riffs in his life. I don't think he necessarily tried to steal it. But I think that was in his head. He had heard it before. Spirit opened for Zeppelin on a few shows. And, he borrowed it. He should have acknowledged it. And I hate to go into this because I don't want, Zeppelin's goons coming after me. But they took a lot of those blues riffs and called them their own. That's not, they didn't. Whereas the Stones gave credit to all those original blues guys. So,
Can you talk a little bit about the Alex Van Halen interview that you recently put on YouTube?
right. So, back in December, I had been sitting on this Alex Van Halen interview, and I didn't realize how long it was. And I looked in there and I realized, it was like both sides of these 90-minute cassettes I had. And I realized that there's like 4.5 hours of interview here. And I thought, wow, this is pretty amazing. This is 85, right? So this is right in the heart of it. This is, Sammy has just joined the band. And I thought, wow, this might be worth putting up on my YouTube channel. And I've been putting stuff up there, some Van Halen stuff, a lot of other miscellaneous stuff. There's a page interview up there and check that, some pretty cool stuff. And so I sent it to my buddy in Australia. He's kind of like my tech guy. He puts all this stuff up on YouTube for me because I don't have a freaking clue how to do it. And he was listening to it and playing it up, and he goes, man, this is pretty amazing. So I thought, you know what, I want to wait on this. I'm going to sit on this a little bit. So it actually sat for a while, and March 12th, I received the third edition of my book, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to use that day to kind of celebrate the arrival of my book at the Long Beach port by putting up this Alex Van Halen interview. That first segment came out on the 12th, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, he was pretty angry with Dave. There was no love lost. And I don't want to blow anybody's fantasy, but there was no love lost between Edward and Dave from the beginning. They needed each other. They were the perfect guitar player frontman. But from the beginning, they were just totally different people. And Alex talks about that. And he gets into a lot of that stuff I wanted to talk to Edward about for the book. The stuff in the family and those early bands, him naming some of those bands that no one ever heard before. And really more than anything, and maybe one of the big reasons for writing the book is that I realized that there were other people out there who really wanted to know more about Edward and about the band. And I've always had this sort of documentarian chronicler kind of a brain thing going on. And I thought, I was there. I was lucky enough to be there and be around these guys and get them on tape, I think other people will be interested in hearing that stuff. And that's why I put out that 6-part Alex Van Halen thing. I mean, for the longest time, I held all those interviews very personally. It's like, no way am I going to you guys hear this stuff. This is mine. This is what I did, if I made some mistakes on there, I don't want you guys to hear that stuff. But my thinking changed. I thought, you know what, not that it deserves, I want it to be out there. And, you know, the response has been pretty amazing. And it's an honest interview, and I didn't edit any of it. And, yeah, I hope those of you who have heard it dug it.
So in the book, you talk about your tapes and how you pull them off the shelf. And I appreciate that you posted them online because after you read about it, you can actually hear it.
Yeah.
Was there anything that is there a tape or interview that just went bad over time that you couldn't get some of that information and knew something was in there but couldn't locate it?
You're talking about the all-time technological lo-fi. That's my brother. I mean, I can barely put a cassette in the cassette player. I'm really bad. I never knew where to hold the microphone. There was noise. I had this cassette player. The capstan would go bad. It'd go, and it would be picked up on the tape on the microphone. So it'd be like, Edward's talking. Stephen. So in answer to your question, there's one tape that has the data. It's like 1983, and there's nothing. And I can barely like something going on, which means I was probably running on a dead battery. You know, it's like, oh my God, what's on the tape? If I bring it to the FBI, can they do wonders, you know? There were other tapes that were like so bad, there was so much noise. Again, my buddy Adam in Australia went through and tried to clean and normalize and EQ. And, you know, yeah, I'm embarrassed by that. On the other hand, that's what it was, man. You know, it was a cheap cassette player, a semi-professional journalist talking to this monstrously successful, talented guitar player, just trying not to, you know, geek out on the guy. So I'm happy I got anything on tape. But yeah, man, there were those moments, unfortunately, with a lot of interviews. I'll give you a quick Jeff Beck story. I have an opportunity to interview Jeff Beck, who was and is my favorite guitar player of all time. So I go to meet him at the Continental Hyatt House. This is the 73. This is BBA. And I go in, and we're talking, and he's just amazing. He's funny, and he's, oh God, it's just amazing. So I get to the end of the cassette, and, you know, I just want to check what I got, so I kind of rewind a little bit, you know, and I don't hear anything. I go, oh, I didn't go back far enough. So I rewind a little bit more, and there's nothing on the fucking tape. And what did I do wrong? I didn't hit record. I hit play. And he's looking at it, and this is the first story I would ever do for a guitar player. I'm thinking, well, that's a good career. It lasted for about 6 hours. You know, I'll never get hired again. And he's looking at me, I'm thinking, oh, please, God, please don't let this be happening, you know. And he's looking and he goes, listen, it's okay. Come back tomorrow, and we'll redo it. Let's continue. He was gracious enough to let me come back. I had a maple strat at the time, really beautiful guitar. I brought it. This is like a peace offering, you know. And I go and he goes, "What's this?" And he's playing it. And he goes, "Oh my God, this is great." Had he said 3 more words, I was going to give him the fucking guitar for letting me come back, you know. It was amazing. Fast forward 5 years, 78. I actually write a book on Jeff. They came out in Japan only, called the Beck Book, and that was a whole other nightmarish scenario. He was unhappy with the book, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so yes, man, I made technical mistakes. Oh, you guys did all that stuff. Where were you? You gotta help me. For God's sake.
Do we have any more questions out here? Any more? Well, I actually think, Steve, that's probably a good time to wrap up because we got to get them into master classes in a couple minutes here.
Yeah.
But we're going to set up some books over here, right?
Yeah,
If you want to purchase a book from Steve, you can get some of the answers to some of the questions that you asked a little deeper, right?
Yeah, way deeper.
Awesome. Let's give a round of applause to Steve Rosen. Over here.